Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today sports media group NFL Wire site dedicated to, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. My co-host is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the dedicated Arizona Cardinals site for SB Nation, and we're here for episode 248 to talk about, well, a number of things as the Cardinals have lost again. They lost 36-26 to the San Francisco 49ers over the weekend and have fallen to 3-7-1. And in this edition of the show, episode 248, we will recap, well, not necessarily recap, but react to the best and worst parts of that game in San Francisco, their fourth straight loss. There's things to talk about with David Johnson. We're talking about the David Johnson situation. We're going to talk about Vance Joseph, defensive coordinator, what seems to be going on with this terrible defense. We're going to look a little bit at Kyler Murray, rookie Kyler Murray quarterback, his season so far, and just how impressive it's been. And with the bye week this week, we're going to kind of look ahead to the rest of the season. We've been doing the last couple of shows, kind of break down, reset, talk about expectations for the rest of the season. So that's coming up on the show in this edition. So Seth, welcome to the show as always. Let's jump right in with the San Francisco game, the game against the 49ers, a 36-26 loss. That was actually much closer than the score said. Let's talk about the best parts of that game. What were your impressions in terms of the best things that you saw from that game?
I think the first thing is you saw obviously the ability to get out quickly. The Cardinals offensively, I mean, they were up 16-0 in the blink of an eye, and if not for a penalty, they're probably up even more. But you know, that is what this team needs from this offense. They need explosive and kind of quick scoring in bunches if they're going to have any success, because we've known and talked about quite a bit that their defense can't hold up. And so it was good to see the offense prove that they could in fact play at a extremely high level, especially when you're talking about maybe the best defense in the NFL right now, in the San Francisco 49ers. The other thing is, I think, and I don't want this to get lost in how bad they finished. Their defense was good enough in the, I would say, first 15 minutes where you're like, oh, maybe this will be the complete performance. But as we get to later, the problems with the defense are kind of hard to nail down right now. But when you look at it, you have to be excited that A, the offense responded, and B, the defense gave them a chance to get out to that early lead, and that, the offense was able to also come back after they'd given up that lead.
Yeah, obviously getting out to the lead early was something shocking. And I want to look at the context of this. You've got one of the best teams in the NFL with one of the best defenses on a quick turnaround. So they're seeing them for the second time in 3 weeks. For good teams,
that means you can make adjustments. And despite the adjustments that San Francisco made, or whatever they game plan for, what the best part continues to be for me is the play of Kyler Murray. We're going to get into more later specifically about his season, but you look at Murray, he completely shredded the San Francisco defense in that first meeting. And in the second one, he still caused problems. Now, obviously, the passing yardage wasn't. They finished 24-33 for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And perhaps for me, the most impressive thing is if you look at this defense, the San Francisco defense, which had only allowed so far a quarterback to go over 200 yards passing, and it was Dandy Dalton and Kyler Murray, is the fact that considering how dominant that defense has been against the pass and against opposing quarterbacks, Kyler Murray was not rattled. He was effective. He was efficient. He didn't turn the ball over, and his play continues to be astonishingly good. Even though we've kind of expected him to be good, he's been, let's be honest, better than advertised, than what we could have ever imagined this year. And against really good teams like the San Francisco 49ers, he's really the only quarterback all this year to kind of solve that San Francisco defense.
Right, and that's the thing, is you look at it, and Roger Sherman of The Ringer tweeted this out, but so every quarterback against the 49ers, not named Kyler Murray, 57% completion, 1,054 yards, that's 4.5 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 57 quarterback rating. So that's a interesting list. I mean, you look at it, you've got Baker Mayfield, you've got Jameis Winston.
It's not an impressive list of quarterbacks, but it's still. You've got
Russell Wilson on there. You've got Jared Goff on there. D. Dalton on there. You had Kyle Allen that absolutely destroyed the Cardinals, but has come back down to earth. And then you had Case Keenum. So, I mean, and Mason Rudolph. So, I mean, Mayfield and Goff and Winston and obviously Russell Wilson have all had varying levels of success.
Right, those are real NFL starting quarterbacks.
And they are all combined in this average. And then you look at Murray, he's completing at 72%, 391 yards, so 6.9 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 114 quarterback rating. Like, those are great numbers for a game. To do that over 2 games against what is the best pass defense in the NFL is just, it really is absurd to see a young player that is a rookie, you know, that had a bunch of question marks coming out, playing at that high of a level.
It really is astonishing. Now, I think one of the best parts as well for me was a moment, and it's the fact that Cliff Kingsbury actually got a non-pass interference call turned into pass interference on review, which, hallelujah, that actually happened. Unfortunately, it didn't happen the week before, but the officiating gods smiled upon Kingsbury. Maybe it was a reward for the Buccaneers game, but we actually saw that challenge work. Now, if Christian Kirk catches that pass, then it doesn't even matter. And then, you know, the fan in me, the part that hates certain players and really dislikes them. I really liked Richard Sherman as a human being and a person, but as a player, I love to see him 3 pass interference calls against Richard Sherman. That was sweet. That really was sort of sweet in the fan in me.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the other thing that we saw was that this offensive line, they gave up 4 sacks, but they are doing a good enough job. I mean, we're talking about one of the worst offensive lines in NFL history last year, and now they're exactly what we talked about. They're a top 22 to 18 offensive line. That's where you wanted to see in year one of Cliff and Kugler. And so to see them doing a good enough job against, again, a phenomenal defense, you have them, out rushing a San Francisco offense that has, outside of the Arizona game, really based their games around running the football. The Cardinals are, on the offensive side of the ball, becoming a very good offense.
I saw Kyle Odegaard tweeted out what they're at for Football Outsiders, that in DVOA they are now 9th in the league in offense, 6.2% I think above average, after being 40% below average a year ago. We've documented that how just to get to respectable was completely absurd to think about. And not only have they gone from historically bad to respectable to actually effective, they've gone from awful to effective. They've scored 25 points or more in 6 of their last 7 games.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when you look at it, and Justice Mosqueda does this every week, and I honestly, quite frankly, have no idea what it is. But it's the ANYA value of every team, and he tweets it out every week. And so if you look at the Cardinals' fluctuation, they're still right near the bottom. But that's a combined offensive and defensive score, and their defense is the second worst in the NFL. And the only worst defense is the Dolphins, which is on a historically bad trajectory this year. But if you look at every week and what it's at, the Cardinals are moving in such the right direction on the offensive side of the ball. They were at a negative, I want to say 600. And again, I can't tell you what these advanced stats mean, but Justice swears by them. So, but they were at a negative 300 just 2 weeks ago. So negative 300.7. So that was after week 8. Wait, is this week? No, sorry, week 9. And then after week 11 this week, they're up all the way to a negative 160. So, I mean, they basically cut where they were in half. And that's just, a lot of that is the fact that Kyler Murray, as a rookie, understands something that even Carson Palmer didn't really understand that well. And that is, if you don't turn the ball over, it gives your offense an opportunity, but it also gives your defense an opportunity, because the one thing that you can't defend is the short field. And when you look at the best teams, they capitalize on turnovers that set up short fields for their offense. And Kyler not giving the opponent a short field is incredibly important for the Cardinals, because it allows them to play the field position battle. Their running game is so good that they're then able to really take their time, like we saw in that what should have been the game-winning touchdown run by Kyler Murray, where that drive I think took 4 minutes, and everybody talks about the Cliff hurry up, but I mean, and that was mostly runs. That was mostly Kenyon Drake and Kyler Murray just finding the holes in the offensive line and going 4 and 5 yards a pop. And so when you're able to protect the ball, but when you're also able to create offense, that's a high level of efficiency. Again, the Cardinals were one of the 3 worst offenses in NFL history last year, and now they're already top 10 in the same ratings category.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, we're going to come back and talk about, well, the worst parts of the game, which there were some bad things. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on Rise Up C-Red, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And all right, let's talk about the bad. Not just the bad, but there was lots of bad. But what was the worst part of that game? And I'm going to guess that for the both of us, it's going to be surrounded by just the atrocious defense that the Cardinals continue to play this season. And more importantly, how they were given, the defense not only gave up a 16-0 lead, they were given once again, and this is something that you put out there on Twitter. That's now 3 games where Kyler Murray has left the field in the final 6 minutes of a ball game with a lead, and they haven't won 3 of them. And then for the third time out of those 6 games, they have not had a win.
Yeah, and I mean, we go back to week 1. They had to settle for a field goal in overtime. That was less than optimal, but the defense had a chance, and the defense couldn't even get them in third downs until that third down that went to a fourth down that led to the field goal. But we all kind of wrote that off as, oh well, first game, great comeback by the offense. The defense, they've got reinforcements coming, and maybe it was just Cliff understanding, watching Patrick in the training camps and things. But Cliff said something, and it stuck with me. And he said, nobody's walking through that door that's gonna, what do you say, bail us out or something to that nature about the defense. And man, was he right. I mean, we all assumed that, hey, they're going to get Patrick Peterson back. This is great. I mean, this is a no-brainer at this point. They're going to improve, and they've gotten worse, and that's the craziest thing. But yeah, so I mean, Tampa Bay got the ball back with 3 minutes and 40 seconds left, and went down and scored in under 2 minutes. That's obviously an issue, but I think a bigger issue, and something that we hit on last week, is that we're seeing this is a constant theme of the defense in second or the end of second quarter, and obviously end of games, because now we're talking about 3 times. But think about it. In Tampa Bay, Tampa got the ball back with 1:03 left. They scored a touchdown. They didn't have to settle for a field goal. They scored a touchdown. So then you start to go through, right? And you're like, okay, well, was that just one game? No, that's been a lot of the games. And it becomes this issue where the Cardinals put themselves in a position to be successful And then for whatever reason, there's a lapse on the defensive side of the ball where they just, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. But, I mean, you had the Carolina game. Carolina got the ball back with 1:36 left, 47 seconds, touchdown. You had the Tampa Bay game. You had the San Francisco game. Now, granted, they held them to a field goal. I guess that's a small victory. But you can't have a team at the end of every half get the ball and go for a touchdown. The 49ers game on Thursday night. I mean, we all lament the Cliff timeout decision, but again, that can't happen. I mean, you can't give up a touchdown there. It seems like end of the half things are where this team fails the most. And even like go back to the Saints game. Remember, Drew Brees and Sean Payton blew not getting points at the end of the half. The Cardinals didn't stop them. They went 60 yards in like a minute and a half, and then
they ran out of time on a holding penalty.
They ran out of time on a holding call that just happened, and so it's just tough to see that anytime it looks like the offense is starting to prosper, or that the Cardinals have a chance to keep the game close or blow the game open, at the end of the half, there's another touchdown scored, and all of a sudden you go in with that, or another point scored, and you go into the half with that deflated feeling of crap. Here we go again. And so when you look at it from that, it's tough for an offense, no matter how good and efficient the offense is. And again, make no mistake, the Cardinals have had issues on offense, but this offense is flowing at an incredibly efficient rate. And it's really hard to have that work when you're talking about a defense that at any given time is going to give points back up.
And I obviously, the one play we can sort of point to as the worst thing of all. I mean, obviously, when Jimmy Garoppolo is against every other team, but looks like a Hall of Famer against the Cardinals, he's now got how many touchdown passes do you have this year? Like 14? 8 of them against, or I think there are 18 touchdown passes on the year. 8 of them have come against the Cardinals. His career high in both of the games. He now has a career high in yards against the Cardinals with 424 yards. His only 300-yard passing games are against the Cardinals, 317 and 424. It's just this pass defense is laughable. It is just laughable. And we can all point to the one play, which was the game-winning touchdown when Garoppolo found Wilson on that dump off that goes for a touchdown, and the image that you see is Chandler Jones diving to cover and try and tackle a guy he's supposed to be covering, and you're thinking, why is Chandler Jones not rushing the passer? And everyone looks at that as this makes no sense at all. Now, a 3-4 defense, I get it. How a 3-4 defense has to work is you have to drop your rushers into coverage every once in a while to keep the offense honest, and that's how you get the matchups later on. Now, this was not a straight drop. This was a peel coverage where, okay, Chandler Jones was going to rush the passer, but if the running back leaks out for a pass, he's got to go cover it. They've got to have a better game plan than that. You can't, on one of the most critical plays of the game, not send him to rush the passer when he is really the only effective disruptor of quarterbacks on the defense.
Well, and did you see that stat from ESPN on
Yes, what they're
disrupted
among the
dropback
worst
defense.
in terms of disrupted dropbacks. It's atrocious.
Yeah, and so that was the whole thing. It's like, why would you then take your best disruptor off the disruption portion of it? And that's what I struggle with the play call more than anything. You want to go zero blitz, I don't care. But having Chandler Jones in coverage at all, we've talked about this, is asinine. Having him in coverage on the biggest play of the game creates...
It's inexcusable.
Right. It changes the perception of maybe Vance Joseph just needs time and talent to... I don't know if Vance Joseph deserves the benefit of the doubt. And that's the hard part for me, because now you're going, this is a play where you cannot justify that. I understand that Chandler Jones has to do a better job of peeling off. I get that. But again, that's not, if you ask me the 10 best attributes of Chandler Jones on the NFL field, not one of those 10 is going to have anything to do with him covering anyone. And that's not a shot at Chandler Jones. He's one of the 5 best pass rushers in the league. But that's just the reality of who he is as a player. It's not a strength. It's not even a weakness. It is something that should not be done, because it is not a logical use of a player's skill set.
Exactly. Other than that, obviously, the worst thing to see was at the end, the resulting touchdown that took it from 30-26 to 36-26. That was another. But even before that, what was just awful was, after San Francisco scores that game-winning touchdown, okay, there's hardly any time left. But, a little bit of magic. You see Kyler do things before. They've got about a minute left. And what is play number 1? Keyshawn fumbles it. That's, for a team that doesn't turn over the ball, that's the one thing you can't have happening, is that you took away the possibility of any sort of magic or even just running out of time to, and then of course they stop them, but in the end, the pitch back lateral that turned into a defensive touchdown, that was gross. That was really kind of a makes you feel dirty kind of way for that game to end, when the truth is a 10-point loss is not what they deserved in that game.
No, and so what happens now is you have a bad beat in a game, but you also have little instances that really cost you the game when you kind of go back over it. You have the missed extra point that changes up everything, because you make that extra point. Now, I know they got a touchdown. I'm very aware that the 49ers scored a touchdown on their drive. However, your defense is being played at a different way, because the whole alleged reason behind going to that zero blitz was you were trying to get a sack that not knocked them out of field goal range, but put them further back for a guy that had just shanked a big kick a week ago. If you know that they have to score a touchdown and you're up by 4, that's a huge, huge difference. We can talk about the Christian Kirk, and he had a good game because he created a ton of yardage. He drew 3 pass interference penalties on Richard Sherman, the one you talked about at the beginning, but also 2 additional. But maybe the biggest play of the game for him ended up, or the 2 biggest plays of the game for him ended up being his offensive pass interference on just a lazy route he ran, and then a crucial drop in a situation where the Cardinals had a 3rd and long. Kyler put the ball on a guy. I mean, he couldn't have thrown a better pass. And Kirk literally had nobody around him for 15 yards, and he just dropped it. And all of a sudden, you know, that's probably 3 points off the board. You talk about a 4-point swing on the called back touchdown, and then you talk about the missed extra point, and all of a sudden you're talking about, you know, all this team losing 7 to 8 points. You can't have that in a game that comes down to your defensive coordinator saying, "Man, we've got to blitz because we can't create pressure any other way, and so we got to take a huge chance." And that's what happened, and it just bit them.
Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to move on from the game, and now we're going to talk about one of the big storylines coming out, and that's David Johnson's disappearance. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. It's time to talk about David Johnson. David Johnson, who, after 6 games this season, he was on pace for over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He was number 10 in yards for scrimmage, and now he has been, don't call it benched, but benched. He was benched after he didn't play after his fumble against Tampa Bay. Chase Edmonds was already beginning to take some of his snaps. He got the 3 snaps before the Chase Edmonds 126-yard game. And then, against San Francisco, after his best week of practice, according to Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim, his best week of practice this season, he is rewarded with 9 first-half snaps, 0 snaps in the second half, and exactly 0 touches or targets. It's almost as if he was as productive as Seth and I were. That's pretty bad.
I was pretty productive on Sunday, to be fair. So I take offense to that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what is going on with David Johnson, but I do know he is a guy that you and I have talked about for the last year. This dates back to 2018, when I don't think anybody would disagree he wasn't used to the fullest extent, but he was a guy that was not running with the same authority that we had seen him run with previously. He wasn't running like a guy, and I hate to say this, running for a new contract. He was running like a guy that was just trying to stay healthy. And, you know, we've talked about the vegan diet. You know, there's been a long list of guys that have struggled once going vegan. Is it the injury that he's sustained at the end of 2016 and then at the beginning of 2017 that kind of changed his mentality of aggressiveness? Whatever it is, we know that he's had issues even under Bruce Arians as a pass protector. We knew he had issues last year. You remember my rant in the Bears loss where they ran the long developing counter play with Chase Edmonds in his first touch of the game instead of David Johnson. But I think it's become obvious that he's not David Johnson of 2015 and 2016. So to expect him to get to that level again, I think is unreasonable from fans and unfair to him, because that's just not who he is as a player anymore.
Which is unfortunate because he's paid like a player who's going to produce that way. Now, here's the thing. Cliff Kingsbury, and I want everyone who's listening to understand, it appears we will never hear Kingsbury publicly criticize a player. The closest thing to criticism I've ever heard him say about any individual player was his reaction to David Johnson's fumble against Tampa Bay. That's something we just can't do. This isn't Bruce Arians who will call out guys for messing up. Now, he protected his players some, but he famously said that Justin Beth was a failure in progress. He called DJ Humphries knee deep. He had different ways of motivating guys. Cliff's not going to do that. But here's the one thing that's quite clear. Actions speak louder than words, and David Johnson is clearly not in the good graces of Cliff Kingsbury at this point in the season. I don't remember if I said it on this show or if it was when I was visiting on a 49ers podcast last week with Chris Biederman from the Sacramento Bee. And this was something I actually heard on the radio, which from Doug and Wolf, and it was Doug Franz who was commenting. He was hoping that this wasn't a situation like Matt Leinart, and I actually liked the comparison because Matt Leinart, his rookie year, showed all sorts of promise. There was all the promise of a future franchise quarterback. And then you get Denny Green fired, you get Ken Wisenhunt come in, so Matt Leinart's not his guy, and he's about competition, so he wasn't lovey-dovey he didn't have the same confidence in Leinart that Green did, or that other people did. And the second you lost some of that confidence, you feel that lack of confidence. Dating back to his days at USC, Pete Carroll is on the record on saying it wasn't until he was put in that situation to say, hey, you're the guy, that he flourished. David Johnson had to work for his success. However, for the last 2.5 seasons, people have talked about him as a star and a key piece of the offense, and I'm sure that confidence is built in him. Now, with a new coach that clearly has lost a little bit of faith in him, how does he respond? Does he go into a shell, or does he come back and fight? And that's kind of what we want to see after the bye, because when you hear the comment that he had his best week in practice, and then he's rewarded with no playing time or touches, that's something. And it's going to be interesting to see what playing time he gets once they come off the bye and play the Rams, and see if this was a message being sent, if it really was as simple as game plan that Cliff Kingsbury said. And I get in some ways to trying to get Kenyon Drake into a rhythm because he performed so well against the 49ers. But we've also seen a lack of David Johnson being utilized in the passing game. And I was telling you off the air, there feels to me, now this is just me reading between the lines a little bit, that, well, one, he looks like a player who's not comfortable completely in this offense. And two, I'm getting the impression that perhaps Cliff Kingsbury is not as pleased with his efforts in practice as he has with other players. Because it was obviously David Johnson, he was the bell cow earlier on the season. And we've seen his production. When he is given the carries, he produces at a very acceptable rate. Any time that he's had really, really poor production, it's because he's had very, very few attempts in the running game. Now, that said, Chase Edmonds started earning playing time. And why did Cliff Kingsbury say he earned playing time? He's earned it in practice. Kingsbury has been very complimentary of Kenyon Drake for his work ethic and his want to, which are referring to kind of practice habits, the way he dove into the playbook to learn things. And the fact that in week 10 was David Johnson's best week of practice, and he didn't get a play basically at all, suggests to me that perhaps there have been some practice issues with Johnson, whether it's because of the injuries that he had, or for whatever reason, he has found his way into the quiet doghouse of Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what that is and how long. And you can tell that it's rubbing off on a lot of different things. because you've seen, the now Patrick Peterson single word tweets. Now his wife is on social media talking about it. And that, it's unfortunate because that doesn't do anything for anybody. That's not going to get him his job back. That's not going to make him play better. That's not going to do anything. So to see that being the kind of response is disheartening, and it concerns me that it will continue the doghousedness of where one David Johnson lies.
Now the question is, moving forward, is if things continue to go in this direction, it makes it very awkward for 2020, because with his $10.2 million in salary fully guaranteed, he's not a guy you can cut. And trading him honestly doesn't do it. It would create $6 million in dead money. Not that big a deal, especially with the cap space that they have. But if you've basically ruined his value, who's going to take him, one? And two, what's it going to cost you to get to dump him? Obviously, you might not be able to get, whether it's you getting a draft pick, you might have to give up a draft pick. It becomes David Johnson and a pick swap to get rid of him. When the truth is, when we know that David Johnson, at least in the passing game, now I'm not advocating his becoming a receiver, because that then changes the way that defenses will cover him. You still need to use him in the running game, but you still need to play him, because if you sort of disappear him, you make him invisible, then you're taking away any possible value. You are souring the fans on who is supposed to become potentially the face of the franchise, and it really sort of makes the general manager once again look foolish for giving a contract to a guy who was hurt and then it didn't work out. Now, Tyrann Mathieu has bet on himself and has done quite well for himself, but we can say for a fact that there was, at the money that he was being paid, that contract was foolish, especially after what he wasn't the same player when he came back from his injuries.
No, he wasn't. But, I think a lot of it comes down to guys changing what got them to where they were. And again, maybe it's just the fact that he just doesn't have the juice anymore. That's something we've talked about quite a bit, is he doesn't look as athletic or fluid on the field. So it's unfortunate, because he was supposed to be a large part of this kind of rebuild, and we laid the blame last year at the feet of incompetence of Mike McCoy, and now it's becoming evident that while Mike McCoy was definitely a lot to blame, he wasn't all to blame.
Apparently. Coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it justifies the fact that, like I've said, you draft a running back and then just draft another one in 3 years and just run them into the ground.
And then hope you strike gold for a couple of years. And that's the history of the Cardinals and running backs. If you look at the history of backs, now, one, they've never, even in the first round, so they have disappointing, almost every back that flashes for a year disappears after that. We're dating back. Johnny Johnson, 7th round pick. He was fantastic his first year. He was still good after that, but his production tailed off. Ronald Moore, fantastic for a year. Production tailed off. Beanie Wells, near the first round pick. He built up, big, then injuries, then he tailed off. And this is kind of a pattern with running backs that you have, is that they produce a big season and then it tapers off. The Cardinals just haven't been able to really ever since Otis Anderson or Stump Mitchell probably, that they really haven't had a running back be a real consistent threat for multiple seasons. And they even say David Johnson had 940 yards last year, and people would say that's a bad year, and he's nowhere near that pace this year. So coming next on the Rise of C-Red podcast, we're going to talk about another sore spot. That's Vance Joseph. What in the world is going on? And let's see, does he need to go? That's kind of the next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Vance Joseph, once again, is a topic. We talked about this in our last show, but another terrifically bad performance defensively. Scheme questions, talent questions, performance questions. And now it's starting. It became very loud. The chatter from people like us became very loud on social media immediately following that game-winning touchdown by the 49ers. And after that has become the topic about things, to even Cliff Kingsbury getting asked if that's been a possibility. After the Mike McCoy experience last year, it becomes the question, is Vance Joseph this year's Mike McCoy? And initially, and we kind of talked about this last week, is that you keep him if you really believe in him as the coach to turn things around next year, or you believe in the scheme. Now, and we also documented last episode, how the Cardinals really sort of painted themselves into a corner when they were insistent upon hiring a 3-4 guy. When you rile against Steve Wilks for changing your 3-4 team to a 4-3 team and say that scheme was the problem, you are painting yourself. So basically, of all the possibilities, it was going to be Chuck Pagano, Vance Joseph, or Mike Nolan. And that was really your only choices of if you wanted to get a guy that was established as any sort of defensive scheme. And yet, we look at it, how much is talent, how much is scheme, how much is coaching. And it is easy to say this. Like, if you want to take it as face value, it's easy to say that's clearly the talent, because when you have 2 seasons with 2 different schemes and 2 different coaches and you produce terrible performance, that leads you to believe that it is mostly talented. We do know that there's a talent deficiency on this defense. But come on, Vance Joseph has not given us the defense that he advertised before the season. And that's the one thing, is that's what got Steve Wilks fired in a way. He promised to be flexible, but then put his system in. Vance Joseph came in this offseason, talked about an attacking 3-4 defense. We're going to do man press. And what have we seen almost all year? We've seen very little man coverage, very little man press, and very little success at all.
Yeah, and I said that's what I'm most concerned or disheartened by, is the fact that you've seen little in the way of aggression, and then that aggression came out in the weirdest, most inopportune time. We've seen both Terrell Suggs and Chandler Jones in coverages this year, which doesn't make a lick of sense, and I haven't understood what the defensive philosophy is. I will say that they seem to have done a better job against the run lately, but I also think that partially that is just the fact that they literally could not stop you and me and 9 of our listeners in a passing game. Like, I've never seen a worse pass defense in my life. From
and what, as you described on Twitter, it's like when your defenses hope they drop the pass or that it's off target, that's not defense.
Yeah. And so you watch this team right now, and there's very little on the defensive side to hang your hat on. And when you have the massive improvement with very little personnel turnover, and now you're seeing no improvement with quite a bit of personnel turnover, mind you, not what we had in mind, but it's becoming to look like it is a two-pronged issue, and the question is, how does it get addressed? And I'm not sure there's an answer.
Now, do I think he will be let go? I don't think he's going to get fired between. Obviously, it probably would have happened yesterday or today. The bye week is as good a time to do it. Cliff Kingsbury said, no, there's haven't been good discussions. At the same time, there doesn't, based on, we could see writing on the wall last year where Steve Wilkes wasn't getting from Mike McCoy what he wanted, because there were public comments he was saying about what he wanted to see from the offense that they just weren't seeing. And he wasn't saying, hey, Mike McCoy, do this. He's saying, oh, we need to do a better job of getting Rosen rolled out to use athleticism, getting both David Johnson, Chase Edmonds in the game at the same time. And that just wasn't happening. Thus far this season, there has been no sort of inkling that Kingsbury is unhappy with what they're doing defensively. And Vance Joseph's comments when he's asked, because he seems to be fairly forthcoming in his comments with the media when he speaks to them, he speaks like a man who feels confident in he's not defensive at all. He doesn't seem to be defending himself more than normal. And so he speaks like a guy who feels confident in his position. So I don't think that they would make a change after the season. I mean, I wouldn't die. I wouldn't cry about it if he left, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's left on, because I think that even though they had the talk of returning to a top 10 defense, with the scenarios that they had with Peterson's suspension and Philon's arrest, and DJ Swearinger's just apparently not being good anymore.
Yeah.
Basically, DJ Swearinger died and was just a cadaver there on the field. That they understand that they need more talent, and that really isn't Vance's fault. That said, we're starting to doubt that when we see weird things at the end of the game, that aggression. Now, granted, we are used to the James Betcher Todd Bowles blitz, 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 and blitz some more. But it's almost like Joseph took that moment to say, see, I do blitz. I am aggressive.
It was almost like see, this is why I don't blitz.
Right. It's like, so it's either, see, I'm right. See, I really am. Now look at the result. This is why I don't do it. Like, he's proving to everyone why he plays soft zone.
Yeah, and so you kind of just, you sit, you wonder if they can get better. Because, like I said, with Patrick Peterson and everything, you expect it to get better, and it seems to be worse. And when you put that into perspective, it makes it tough to justify keeping Vance at the end of the year. But I think they'll probably give him at least one more season, barring the final 5 games ending like the San Francisco game.
Ooh, that would be bad. And honestly, they don't have to turn it around, and they don't have to be a drastic turnaround. We just know in 2020 they can't be this bad. They need to be competent defensively, and they're competent defensively. This team will win a lot of football games because of how the offense plays. They just need to be adequate. They just can't be bad. That's really all we're asking at this point. If the Cardinals keep growing offensively, if they can be at least what they are now offensively, then really all they need the defense to be is not bad. It's like, okay, we know we're not going to. It's like the kid that you know is not an A student or even a B student. You just want them to graduate. It's good. Just don't be dumb. Don't get Fs. Get Ds, maybe some Cs.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my biggest thing is you want to see a team improve, and regression is not okay at this instance. And so we'll see kind of how that plays out to the end of the year.
Coming up next on the Niners and Seattle podcast, we're going to talk about Kyler Murray next. The best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We're going to talk about his season. I've got some really, really nice, really interesting stats that'll blow your mind. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We're going to talk about Kyler Murray as he continues to be the bright spot on this team. And we spoke about just what he had been able to do against the San Francisco 49ers, but you just have to be blown away at how good he's been. He's already set several records, okay? With his 17 combined touchdowns, he already has set the rookie record for the Cardinals for total touchdowns. Okay, 17 touchdowns, 14 touchdown passes, 3 rushing touchdowns. He set the rookie record for the most consecutive passes without an interception with 211. He has the most completions through X amount of games. He's had 4 or 5 300 yards games this season. So these things that no rookie has been doing, but he's still on pace for more. He is still on pace. He's now with 150 passing yards. It did dip him below the pace of 4,000 passing yards. He's still on pace for 3,931 yards this season. And that still, if he gets that pace, that is still the 6th best passing total in Cardinals history. And mind you, Kurt Warner did better than that only once. Only once. He has 418 rushing yards this year so far through 11 games. The quarterback rushing record, not rookie rushing record, but quarterback rushing record. There's 2 records, I'm going to say. The actual one that you'll find Elias, and I double-checked with the team on this, is Charlie Trippi in 1951. He rushed for 501 yards. But he was not only a quarterback. He started 7 games at quarterback that season, and he played a number of positions. So that is the official record. Tim Rosenbaugh in 1990, his first year starting, he rushed for 470 yards. Kyler Murray is going to break both those marks. He's got 5 games left. He is right now, his interception rate of 1.3%, if he continues at this pace, will completely obliterate the lowest interception rate in team history for qualifying passers. I believe the official record for the Cardinals is Carson Palmer's in 2015 he had an interception rate of 2%. And I think they cut it off at 300 pass attempts. If you take that down to 250 pass attempts in a season, the Carson Palmer and Kent Graham are the lowest at 2.0%. And if you take that down to 200 passing yards or 200 passing attempts, well, then you get Carson Palmer at 1.3%. But here's the thing. Kyler Murray has 1.3% interception rate. That will obliterate. I'm assuming that will continue. That will obliterate the Cardinals team record. And that's not a rookie record. That's a franchise record. If we want to look at some of the accomplishments he's on pace to do, well, with the 14 touchdown passes, it looks like he should get at least 20 touchdown passes this season based on what we're seeing in the last few games. That would mean 6 touchdown passes in the final 5 games. Very reasonable. If he gets to 20 touchdown passes, I will tell you this. There is only one other quarterback in franchise history to have fewer than 10 interceptions with at least 20 touchdown passes, and that was Jim Hart in 1974, a Pro Bowl year for him, when the Cardinals went 10-4. He had 20 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions. Never has there ever been another quarterback in team history to have fewer than 10 interceptions and at least 20 touchdown passes. Just record after record after mark continued to be in the sights and look like they are most certainly going to be broken. He's already broken the team record for rookie passing yards. He passed that a couple of weeks ago, Matt Leinert's mark. He is one touchdown pass away from tie, so 2 touchdown passes away from the most touchdown passes for a rookie. He is 2 wins. If they can get 2 wins, he will set the franchise rookie record for wins as a starting quarterback. My goodness, just the stat after stat that I keep looking, every metric I look at is incredible.
Yeah, and you look at his pace and what he's been able to do. And again, you look at the offensive talent. It's not like it's extraordinary. They've been, they've had a good season, but they've had guys that haven't produced. Outside of Fitz, I don't think anybody's been what you would say is consistent. You've had different guys step up in different with different chances, but there hasn't been a consistent production. The show he has put on as a rookie, and the fact, again, we talked a little bit about it to start the show. The fact that he was able to do it in his second outing against the best defense in the NFL. So the second time the 49ers saw him makes it even more impressive, because that is a team, obviously, that is shutting down opponents' passing.
Yeah. Everyone.
And the fact that they saw him a second time and he was great. Remember, he's the only quarterback this season to have a QB rating over 100 against the 49ers. He is the only quarterback that has no turnovers against the 49ers. I mean, what he's done has been improbable. And then to see him do it again for the first time against a team that has already seen him once, it just shows you where he is at as a player and where he is really headed.
Interesting note. He has 393 pass attempts this year, which is the exact number that Josh Rosen did a year ago. Let's take a look at the difference. And we were all on this. I will admit, I was all on board for Josh Rosen. I believed he was the future, that he would be better. He's turned out to be nothing so far. But let's look at this. So Josh Rosen threw 393 pass attempts all last season in 14 games and 13 starts. He completed 217 of those passes on 55.2% completion, 2,278 yards, 11 touchdowns, 14 interceptions with an average or yards per attempt of 5.8. Kyler Murray, same amount of pass attempts, has done it in 3 fewer games and 2 fewer starts, completed 254 passes, so almost 40 more completions, which is 64.6%. He has over 400 more yards at 2,703. He has 3 more touchdown passes. He only has 5 picks, so 9 fewer interceptions. And his yards per attempt, even though, let's face it, this offense has been accused of being a dink and dunk. In fact, he has had 2 games that were just, when it came to yards per attempt, were awful, awful, awful. And he is still averaging 6.9 yards per attempt, which is above average. And when you look at kind of the metrics across the league, that's right. That's a little bit above average of what you kind of want to see. Kyler Murray, in as many pass attempts, has accomplished so much more than Josh Rosen did a year ago. necessarily believe that the Cardinals should have drafted Kyler Murray, but boy, oh boy, did they make that right decision. There is nothing. Nick Bosa would be fantastic in this defense, but Nick Bosa plus Josh Rosen isn't going to produce like this with Kingsbury in his first year. He would be better than he was last year, but what Kyler Murray is doing, that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it just stems from the fact that Murray is a guy that, again, he takes care of the ball exceedingly well. He is a player that has been successful at every level, so he has a confidence and an understanding of what his job entails each and every game. And so when you kind of just put it all together, you see a guy that is not only playing at a high level, but he is a leader. He is a guy that expects to be the one that is, counted on. And you've seen the frustration by him lately that they're not succeeding. And the fact that, he feels like he can do more is impressive to me. And it shows me that when it all is said and done, like you said, the right move was made for the long-term franchise and the long-term future of the franchise.
Coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We'll do the final segment. We're going to look ahead at the schedule that's remaining. What are reasonable expectations? The Cardinals are on the bye, so let's look at what's happening after the bye. Let's coming next on Rise Up C-Red. Back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web, to talk the last few minutes about, okay, so they're 3-7-1. They've got 5 games left. We kind of been resetting things. What really is our reasonable expectations for the Cardinals moving forward? They've got the bye week. Then they've got 3 games. They've got a tough December schedule. They've got 5 games in December. But the first 3 are at home. They host the Rams. They host the Steelers. They host the Browns. Then they're on the road to play Seattle and Los Angeles to end the season. Looking ahead, what do we see in a Rams? So we've got a 6-4 Rams team. They look beatable, don't they?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we talked about. We didn't expect a win this weekend, and so to come away the last 2 weekends in games where, quite frankly, the Cardinals should have won is frustrating, because instead of sitting at 5-5-1, they're 3-7-1, and going into a real run of games where you feel confident that this team can compete and potentially win 3 games. And so that's I think for me what's the most frustrating thing about the last 2 weeks. It's not about losing. It's about the fact that they had the chance to win both games, and in doing so really set themselves apart. And
so you've got the 6-4 Rams. I think that's winnable. I think that they kind of found a rhythm. Jared Goff's, they can do stuff still. But I think, especially now, if we kind of look at the season, September, winless. October, 3 wins. November, winless. I think this is the time where the Cardinals might, especially the way they've lost the last 2 games, they might be able to get on a little bit of a roll. Now, the defense can we see some defensive improvement? I'm not saying that they need to win the next 3 games, but we should see 2 wins out of the final 5, I think. I think that's not too much to understand. Like, before, when we talked about this, I said anything less than 6 wins would probably be a disappointment. But now that they lost that Tampa game, I think we should be disappointed if they don't get 2 more wins, because the Steelers are beatable. They're going to be without Marquise Pouncey unless his appeal shortens his suspension. The Browns are definitely a winnable game, especially with Myles Garrett out, although there will be Steve Wilks, I'm sure, will be nothing more than love to mete out a little bit of revenge with his defense against the Cardinals. And then those 2 last games on the road are going to be tough. Seattle and LA. I think it's going to – the LA one, I think, is a potential maybe one of those things, depending on how the Rams finish their season. But I think you have to hope for 2 out of those 3 home games that you can get a win out of. And I think hopefully coming out of the bye, that's what you really want to see. You want to see them get off on the right note and getting a win against the Rams. After the bye, they've had extra time to prepare. They can kind of reestablish the final quarter.
Yeah, and you look at it, the month of November was a bad one for this team, and nobody's going to deny that. But they were in a position to win 2 games this month, and quite frankly 3 if you include the October game on Thursday night. And so they have struggled to finish, and that's the difference between bad teams and good teams. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but good teams find ways to win, bad teams find ways to lose. And right now, the Cardinals are a bad team. They're 3-7-1. I mean, that just comes with the territory. But if they find a way, like you said, to win 2 of 5, they finish 5, 5-10-1. That's not a bad uptick from last year. It keeps them in a position to get a good player at the top of the draft, which they still desperately need, and then they can go kind of roll into year 2 with a ton of cap space, unless they end up with a bunch of dead money again. But it looks like they're ascending in the right direction. Now it's just about finding ways to win games instead of playing close games.
It would be the perfect way to end the season, with all the troubles that they've had with finishing games, to then turn it around and finish the season strong. I think that's the next big step in their progress, is learning how to finish games, learning how to finish drives. I mean, they've had trouble finishing drives. They're scoring touchdowns a little more often. They're having trouble finishing defensive possessions. They play well on first and second down, and then are awful on third down. They're having trouble finishing games. They come up way with a lead, and they can't close it out and win it, or they build a lead and don't put them away. So now, this would be the perfect progression to take in the next month of the season, would be then to learn how to finish the season by finishing games. It'd be a perfect way to do it. I'm not saying they need to be 5 in a row, or even 4 in a row, or even 3 in a row, but 2 wins, I think, would be kind of baseline for what we see, and to have no more defensive just debacles after this point. And with that, let's close up the show of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Obviously, there's no game this weekend, but I think next week we'll try and see if there'll be a show next week, depending on plans between our families on the Thanksgiving week. We might do something thankful, kind of break down the schedule, look the rest of the way, something. That we'll probably be back next week. If not, we won't. But I plan on next week. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, go Cardinals.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up C-Red.
Roll!